I still remember that evening clearly. She sat down next to me, her eyes deliberately avoiding mine, but her voice was decisive. "You know, I need some time to figure myself out." No contact. I didn't react immediately. I observed. Every detail mattered. Her breathing, choice of words, hand gestures, the distance between us. I absorbed it all calmly. No anger, no pleading. Just a clear, cold statement carrying the boundaries she set. I immediately began analyzing. The distance she requested wasn't a random decision, it was calculated. I assessed the potential consequences, how this time apart would affect our relationship, what information could be exposed, and how I should prepare for every possibility. I controlled my breathing, kept my mind sharp, and didn't let emotions take over. This wasn't the time to get upset or beg. It was the moment to observe, analyze, and plan the next moves. I noted the way she shifted in her seat, the subtle avoidance of eye contact, the hidden signals in her posture that only a careful observer would notice. The first few days, I followed my plan precisely. No messages, no calls, no social media stalking. I told myself that respecting her personal space was important, and at the same time, it was an opportunity to observe her behavior, reactions, and the effects of this separation. Every action became data. I also paid attention to my own routines, reading news, preparing meals, organizing the apartment. Maintaining a consistent rhythm helped me retain control and clarity about the unfolding situation. Then a notification appeared on my phone. Her mother had tagged her in a long post about sometimes people need to find themselves and she'll return when ready. I read every word carefully. This wasn't generic advice. It included details that could only come from our private life. I catalogued everything, analyzing the phrasing, the emphasis, and its potential impact on our relationship and our privacy. I didn't react immediately. I let things settle, evaluated the influence, and devised possible responses. Should I text her or wait for her to reach out? Should I ask directly or continue observing? Every choice was calculated, prioritizing privacy, maintaining self-control, and keeping a clear mind. While many would feel betrayed or hurt, I focused on analysis, identifying what mattered and what was mere noise. Over the following week, I documented everything: her online activity, subtle social media interactions, comments from friends and family. Each detail became part of a dataset for strategic decisions. I realized her silence wasn't complete rejection. It was a subtle message about her feelings, needs, and control over her own space during this period. I reminded myself that staying calm, observing, and analyzing was the only way to maintain control. Feelings of hurt, confusion, or frustration existed, but I set them aside, not letting them dictate actions. Every step I took was calculated, every decision guided by logic and data, not impulse. While observing, I noticed small details: how she interacted with friends, how she updated her status, how her mother tried to influence indirectly. I logged and ranked each of them by potential impact on our relationship. None of these details provoked rash reactions. Instead, there were pieces of a puzzle I needed to complete to plan my next moves. Looking back, this moment wasn't just about her needing space. It was a test of observation, analysis, and maintaining control in a situation where emotions normally dominate. I realized that to truly understand someone and a relationship, you sometimes need distance, careful observation, and analysis, rather than impulsive reactions. In the silence, I found strategy, assessed the situation, and prepared for every outcome, all while remaining calm, detached, and in control. Every action of mine from that point on was measured, checking my phone, reviewing old messages, reorganizing my living space. I focused on what I could control and accepted what I couldn't, avoiding wasted energy on things beyond my reach. My strategy was clear: stay alert, observe, analyze, and prepare calculated moves, all in silence and calm. Ultimately, I understood that this distance wasn't just a test for her. It was a test for me too. I had to prove that I could handle a complex situation without letting emotions take over, maintain control, and analyze every development. And I realized that sometimes detachment and strategy are the only way to truly see the reality of a relationship. We had been together for 3 years. In Brooklyn, our apartment was a quiet refuge in the midst of the city's relentless pace. The space was a patchwork of our lives, her half-empty coffee mugs on the counter, my vinyl records stacked in uneven piles, and plants she insisted on keeping alive, even though she had no particular talent for gardening. These small details didn't just mark the apartment, they marked us. They were the tangible proof of shared routines, the subtle markers of coexistence. I spent those days after her declaration observing everything with the same meticulous attention I'd applied to her words. Each movement she made, every indirect comment online, every interaction with her mother or friends became data. I catalogued patterns, looking for deviations that might indicate shifts in feelings or priorities. The Brooklyn streets outside were alive with energy neighbors, walking dogs, streetlights flickering on as the evening descended, but none of that penetrated the bubble I had created around my analysis. I was detached, alert, and logical. Emotions were noted, but they were secondary to observation. Our relationship had always been a balance of give and take, with subtle negotiations that often went unnoticed by outsiders. We argued occasionally about trivial things, whose turn it was to do dishes, leaving lights on, or the placement of furniture, but these small conflicts were handled with a quiet pragmatism. Each disagreement had its rhythm, and we learned each other's limits over time. It was almost as if we had an unspoken contract: respect each other's space, understand each other's routines, and accept the minor irritations as part of the package. Until that evening, everything had followed that unspoken logic. I reviewed memories with an analytical eye. The trips we had taken, the small weekend routines, the way she laughed at jokes only I made, all became data points to assess the stability of our connection. I realized that these markers, while comforting, were also evidence of patterns that could be disrupted. And now, with her request for space, I had to reevaluate each pattern to anticipate how our dynamic might shift. What had been a predictable, almost algorithmic routine was now in flux, and every decision I made in response needed to be carefully calculated. Observing my own reactions became part of the strategy. I noticed how I tightened my schedule, how I scrutinized notifications, how I checked her social media with precision rather than impulse. Each interaction, her liking a post, commenting, or the timing of her online presence, was examined for meaning. I had to distinguish between coincidence and intent, separating personal interpretation from objective observation. The logic of detachment became crucial, understanding that every piece of data could influence a future decision. Her mother's involvement added another layer. The posts tagging her were carefully worded, a mix of general advice and pointed observations. I analyzed them not just for content, but for intent. Were they attempts to manipulate, to guide, or simply careless commentary? Each comment, each like from friends or family, was logged mentally. I considered potential motives, weighing what might be genuine concern against what might be strategic influence. Maintaining clarity required compartmentalizing feelings about her mother, and about myself. Emotional reactions had to be noted but never allowed to dictate action. Through all of this, I also observed the routines of our shared environment. How the apartment felt when she was home versus away, the subtle changes in space and sound, the echo of her absence in places once filled with her presence. These were the physical manifestations of the relational shift. Reminders that while feelings are intangible, their effects are observable. I documented them in thought, mentally noting the differences in behavior and presence, the subtle cues that might indicate how she was coping with her own decision. I realized that understanding a relationship in crisis required more than empathy, required an analytical approach. Detachment was not indifference. It was a strategic tool. By maintaining clarity, I could observe patterns, predict possible outcomes, and preserve the structural integrity of what we had built together. Every action, every pause, every decision became part of a larger analysis aimed at both protecting myself and understanding the trajectory of our connection. Looking at the broader picture, I acknowledged that her request for space was a test of multiple variables: patience, communication, observation, and emotional intelligence. It wasn't a final judgment, nor was it a simple request for separation. It was a signal, a variable in a complex system that required careful monitoring. I had to evaluate not just her behaviors, but my own responses, constantly recalibrating to ensure that every choice was measured, calculated, and aligned with the reality I could observe, rather than the assumptions I might make by the end of that week. The apartment felt simultaneously familiar and strange. Familiar because every object, every habit, every memory reminded me of routines we had established. Strange because the emotional resonance had shifted. The patterns that once provided comfort now required scrutiny. And I accepted this shift, not with despair, but with clarity. I understood that maintaining cold, strategic observation was not just a method of coping. It was the most reliable way to preserve both understanding and control within the relationship. The distance she demanded was not just a challenge for me. It also exposed emotional layers I hadn't fully acknowledged. One evening, I saw her appear in a friend's post on social media, smiling, relaxed, yet with a fleeting look of uncertainty. I observed every detail: finger placement, posture, distance from others. Every nuance could be meaningful, but I had to separate logic from speculation. I realized the tension wasn't solely from the distance itself, but from the constant need to evaluate her behavior, my reactions, and outside influences: her mother's posts, friends' comments, even indirect messages I had previously ignored. Everything became complex, yet I remained composed. I knew that a single impulsive reaction or poorly timed message could completely derail the observational strategy I had built. One day, her mother posted long reflections on love, distance, and personal growth. This time, I read every word, noting each implication, assessing whether it was a reminder to her daughter or a subtle signal to me. I evaluated the potential impact on our relationship, identifying actions necessary to maintain control while respecting the boundaries she set. I understood that it wasn't just her actions that mattered, but also the influence of those around her. Every detail was catalogued and ranked by potential significance. Tension peaked when I noticed she interacted with an old friend, not just liking a post, but commenting. Most people would panic. I didn't. Instead, I analyzed closeness, history, potential influence, and what I needed to prepare for. I maintained logical distance between data and emotion. Every small action became part of the bigger picture. Another evening, I reviewed old messages, memories we had shared intimately. These recollections suddenly felt sensitive. The distance wasn't just creating tension between us. It was tension between past and present. Familiar feelings now felt strange. But I stayed calm, noting every emotion as observational data, refusing to let it dictate my actions. I analyzed what truly mattered versus what was noise. The tension hit another high when one morning she posted a short status. Sometimes we just need to find ourselves. No comments, no explanation. Cold yet meaningful. I didn't react immediately. I observed timing, friends, interactions, potential implications for me. I logged every detail, compared it to previous patterns, and planned my next moves. In this situation, any rash action would only disrupt the structure I was trying to maintain. An undercurrent of unease arose, but I kept it contained, not letting it influence behavior. I realized that tension didn't always come from others. It came from within assumptions, worries about the future, uncertainty. I learned to separate observational data from inner emotion, to perceive the situation clearly and logically every day. I maintained an observation schedule, checking social media, noting interactions, recording behaviors, analyzing motives, and preparing for all possibilities. I also monitored myself, breathing, responses to new information, maintaining calm and logical reasoning. Every detail was part of a long-term strategy. Preparation for whatever developments might occur. In the following week, tension accumulated silently. I sensed clearly that her request for space wasn't a sign of collapse. It was a variable in a complex relationship, requiring both of us to confront change. I continued to observe and analyze, knowing that remaining calm, strategic, and detached was the only way to navigate the situation while retaining control. Through all these days of observation, I realized one truth. Conflict didn't only come from her or from distance. It emerged from analyzing, predicting, and preparing for every possibility. It was the tension between wanting connection and respecting space, between observational data and emotion, between reason and memory. Every small detail contributed to the complete picture of conflict. A week passed in silent observation, and the tension began to build like pressure inside a sealed container. The distance she demanded wasn't just an emotional challenge. It tested my ability to observe, analyze, and strategize. Every gesture, every social media post, every indirect comment from friends or her mother became data I had to process. Nothing went unnoticed. One afternoon, I noticed her appear in a short story post from a friend, smiling, at ease, yet her eyes flicked around as if scanning her environment. I analyzed every gesture, hand placement, the distance from others, tone of voice while laughing. This data was both information and warning. It told me she was adjusting, probing reactions from afar. I had to respond precisely. No haste, no display of emotion, only observation and recording. Tension escalated when her mother continued posting long messages, this time about independent skills, and how space fosters personal growth, accompanied by subtle hashtags aimed at her daughter. I analyzed every word, placing it into the bigger picture, which was genuine advice, and which was a signal directed at me. I realized that her actions were increasingly influenced by outside factors, and I needed to adjust my strategy to maintain control of the situation. One evening, I discovered she had interacted with an old friend, not just liking a post, but commenting in a meaningful, intimate way. Most people would panic. I didn't. I analyzed past relationship, possible intent, and potential impact on our current dynamic. I catalogued it mentally, compared it to previous patterns, and predicted the next steps. Tension flared, but I stayed composed, treating it as a strategic challenge, not a personal betrayal. The following day, another notification appeared. She had been tagged in a long post by a mutual friend, accompanied by comments about time to find yourself and growth requires space. I read every word, analyzed potential impact, and assessed how it might affect the relationship. Tension was no longer just an internal feeling. It was a complex system where every gesture, word, and tiny detail could shift the outcome. I began maintaining a detailed observation schedule, tracking times, levels of closeness, influence potential, and possible responses. I also monitored myself, heart rate, reactions to new information, my level of calm and logic. I noted everything but refused to let emotion dictate my actions. Each detail was analyzed, ranked, and used to plan every next step. Tension spiked higher when she posted a short, cold story. There are times when you just need to be alone to find yourself. No explanation, no comment. I didn't react immediately. Instead, I analyzed timing, interactions, surrounding context. Everything became data, every move carefully calculated. During this time, I realized an important truth. The conflict didn't only come from her or from the distance. It came from within, me from assumptions, worries about the future, and memories and desires for connection. I learned to separate emotion from data, maintain absolute composure, and perceive the situation logically. The tension had become a mental battlefield between the desire to act and the need to wait, between memory and reality, between emotion and logic. Every post, gesture, and indirect message was a piece of the overall conflict. And I knew that one wrong step, one impulsive reaction, could destroy all the observation and analysis I had built in the following days. I maintained a strict observation schedule, checking social media, recording behavior, analyzing motives, predicting reactions, and preparing for all scenarios. I also monitored myself, my calmness, breathing, and logical reasoning. Every action, no matter how small, was part of a long-term strategy to handle any possible developments. The peak tension emerged when I realized the distance she demanded was no longer just a personal challenge. It had become a variable in the complex system of our relationship. It tested analytical skills, patience, and the ability to maintain control. And I understood that in the silence, I was simultaneously observing, planning, and preparing for the next turning point, a move I knew would completely change the dynamics of this relationship. One evening, while analyzing social media interactions, a small but unexpected detail appeared. Her mother had tagged her directly in a photo I hadn't seen before. The photo wasn't ordinary. It captured an intimate moment from a few months prior, when we were walking together through Brooklyn at sunset, the light casting softly on her face. What had been an ordinary gesture suddenly became an unexpected signal, a sign that the boundaries she had set might be shifting or being tested. I observed carefully. The accompanying caption didn't mention me directly, but the words hashtag and friends interactions all carried subtle messages. In that moment, all the observation strategies and contingency plans I had built over the past week were being challenged. I didn't show emotion. Instead, I recorded everything as data, analyzing every possibility. Was this a signal that she wanted to test my reaction? Or merely accidental? Was there strategic intent from her mother? Shortly after, she sent me a private message, short, cold, but meaningful. I need you to understand what I'm trying to do. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I read the words over and over, noting each pause, period, and emphasis. The message was both a reminder and a challenge, requiring me to balance personal feelings with logic, analyzing every step and scenario carefully. This moment marked a true turning point. From passive observation, I was forced to take deliberate action. I realized that the distance, the silence, and the signals from her mother were no longer just tests. They were a comprehensive assessment of my composure, observational skills, and strategic thinking. I had to act precisely. One misstep could destroy everything I had observed in the previous week. I began restructuring my strategy, classifying critical versus non-critical information, predicting potential reactions, and identifying safe moves. I understood that this turning point was not only a conflict between her and me. It was a conflict between logic and emotion, observational data and memory, the desire for connection and the need to respect personal space. Every action I took now had to be deliberate, informed by accurate information rather than instinct. In the following days, tension reached its peak as she began to engage again, but indirectly. Short messages, subtle likes, understated comments, each interaction becoming data for analysis. I measured closeness, hidden intent, potential influence on me and our relationship. I remained calm, observing and analyzing, but did not react impulsively. Any rash move could destroy the observational strategy I had painstakingly built. The climax of the turning point came when she directly referenced a shared memory in an online conversation, a detail only we knew. What seemed like a casual gesture was a powerful signal. She was opening a window, testing my response. I realized that this turning point forced me to shift from passive observation to proactive strategy, how to reply, maintain distance, and balance protecting myself while preserving the relationship. I analyzed. A response too enthusiastic would reveal emotion and lose control. A response too cold could be misinterpreted, creating a rift. Between the two, I had to find the optimal balance. This was the true turning point. From passivity, I had to act strategically, maintaining logic, observation, and planning. Every action now carried meaning. Every decision needed careful calculation in that moment. I realized one clear truth. The turning point did not come from distance or silence alone. It came from her creating an opportunity for me to demonstrate composure, observational skill, and strategic intelligence. It was a dual challenge, both logical and emotional. I had to adjust every move, preparing for the next high-stakes phase, where each decision could redefine the relationship entirely. The peak of tension had finally arrived. After days of observation, analysis, and strategic planning, I realized that this was no longer a mere test of observation. It had become a mental duel where every action, word, and emotion was calculated. In that moment, I felt an invisible pressure. One mistake could shatter not only the relationship, but also my own composure. One evening, she reached out to me, but this time not with a short or indirect message. She wrote at length, calmly yet coldly, about her confusion, worries, and the changes in her mindset. Every sentence carried subtle meaning, challenging my reaction. I read each word, each comma, analyzing every pause and emotional nuance. Every detail became data for adjusting my strategy. Tension erupted when she mentioned a past event, a moment of intimacy we had shared, now recalled with a tone both subdued and questioning. I realized this was the true test. My response would determine the next move and influence the entire relationship. I didn't let emotion take over. Instead, I analyzed. Too passionate a response would reveal my feelings and lose control. Too cold, and she might misinterpret, creating an unbridgeable gap. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down. I observed not only her behavior, but also my internal responses: heartbeat, breathing, the sense of unease, all recognized but not allowed to dictate my actions. I had to maintain absolute calm, handling the situation like a strategist, step by step, decision by decision. Word by word, the conflict reached its peak when she unexpectedly sent a short video, a private moment only we knew. In the video, she looked directly into the camera, her eyes both ambiguous and challenging. I understood the message clearly. She was testing my boundaries, seeing how I would respond. This was the ultimate test. Before every decision I made could shape the relationship's outcome, I had to choose how to reply in a way that retained control yet didn't hurt her. I analyzed every word in her message, every glance in the video. Every tiny detail carried meaning. Every move had to maintain logic, protect myself, and navigate maximum pressure from the conflict. In the meantime, I realized something. The climax wasn't just external conflict, was also a confrontation with myself. The urge to show emotion, to react instinctively, surged strongly. Yet I maintained composure, analyzed every possibility, compared it to previous data, predicted her responses, and planned each step. Tension had reached its maximum, but I retained complete control. The final high point came when she asked directly, "Do you understand me? Or are you just observing?" A simple question, yet it carried the weight of the entire relationship. I didn't respond immediately. I analyzed. An instant reply would reveal emotion. A measured response would buy time for observation and careful thought. I chose to stay calm, responding in a composed, logical tone, yet leaving a subtle space for her to sense my concern. This was the climax. All tension, all data, all strategy converged in one decisive moment. And in that moment, I realized a profound truth. The greatest conflict wasn't just between the two of us. It was a duel between logic and emotion, observation and action, data and memory. Every decision in this climax would shape the future of our relationship, and I had to maintain calm and strategy to navigate the peak without losing control. After the climax, the atmosphere seemed to calm. In the following days, I continued to observe and analyze her reactions, while also evaluating myself. The distance, subtle signs, and indirect interactions were still present. But now they were no longer testing pieces, they became data for making the final decisions. I realized that resolving conflict isn't about acting on impulse or emotion. It relies on logic, analysis, and refined strategy, she began sending longer messages, expressing her confusion, worries, and genuine thoughts about the relationship. Her tone remained cold, but was slightly more open. I read every sentence repeatedly, noting each pause, emphasis, and analyzing every possible reaction. Every detail mattered. Her word choice, sentence structure, and timing all became crucial information for my next steps. I replied in a calm, clear tone, protecting myself while leaving a subtle opening for her to understand that I still cared. I avoided overly emotional words, focusing instead on presenting my perspective logically, explaining clearly what had happened and how I felt. This response caused her to pause, read carefully, and reply thoughtfully. In that moment, tension decreased, but there remained a cautiousness, not a challenge anymore, but a subtle cooperation between two people. In the following days, we began establishing new communication rules, honest but respecting personal space, sharing feelings while remaining logical, observing without judgment. I realized that resolving conflict isn't about winning, it's about finding a way for both parties to maintain respect, control emotions, and truly understand each other. The silent days before now became a valuable lesson, learning to observe, analyze, and understand oneself before confronting another. During this process, I also reflected on myself. I realized that maintaining composure, observing, and analyzing emotional data not only helped control the situation, but also helped me understand my own limits, strengths, and how emotions could influence decisions. I learned that sometimes strength isn't about immediate action, it's patience, analysis, and choosing the right moment to respond. She gradually opened up as well. We started discussing our fears, misunderstandings, and even the beautiful memories we hadn't addressed before. Each conversation was a small but meaningful step forward. We learned to listen to each other, analyze behavior without judgment, and slowly rebuild trust. In the end, I realized something essential. A relationship isn't just about feelings or love, it's about balancing logic and emotion, observation and action, respect and sharing. Conflicts and distance aren't enemies, they are opportunities for growth, understanding, and building a stronger foundation for the future. I learned that controlling oneself, analyzing situations, and choosing the right strategy not only helps overcome conflict, but also creates a more resilient relationship. Looking back on the past weeks, I felt a strange calm. No more tension, no more indirect tests, only understanding, respect, and a renewed belief in how we could navigate life together. From silence, distance, and high tension, we had reached a balance where logic, emotion, and strategy converged, creating stability and a deeper mutual understanding than ever before.